Hi there. In this video I'm going to look at a film that made a big impact on me and my work. It's a perfect example to illustrate the art of creating a look or feel within a project. Chinese director Wong Kar-wai has directed a number of amazing movies, but it's commonly thought that In the Mood for Love is his masterpiece. The film is a very simple storyline of forbidden love, but he manages to explore the subject so deeply that we as viewers are held in a sort of timeless space as the actors play out their experience of loss and separation and isolation. Apart from the feel or mood that he created, there are a number of lessons that we as photographers can extract from the film. The effect that layering has on the way in which we interpret a photograph, the effects of color on mood, the emphasis on texture, as well as how the choice of focal length of the lens influences how viewers respond to subject matter. Apart from these useful lessons, watching this film is like being in a fast-moving slideshow, made up of perfectly framed still images. The director isn't relying solely on the motion aspect of movie making. He's holding the viewer's attention by constructing each frame as if it were a painting. If you enjoy this film, then you can binge watch all of his movies. They're all great, including Chungking Express, 2046 and Fallen Angels. Wong Kar-wai has had a long-term collaboration with the cinematographer Christopher Doyle, and together they've created a film aesthetic that has been described as anti-Hollywood. In the Mood for Love follows two neighbors whose spouses are having an affair. They are initially drawn to each other for mutual support, but over time they fall in love. There's no future for this relationship, so they're trapped in this kind of suspended drama. And we as viewers are watching the interaction as voyeurs. And he's gone about filming it in a particular way that emphasizes this. I'll talk about it later. This is where the first photographic takeaway is, and that is how to use layering. He uses the technique of layering in a lot of his scenes, and what he does is put a barrier or some kind of obstruction between the lens and the subjects. Alternatively, he actually frames within the frame, so you'll have a doorway or a window, that kind of effect. So these devices are used to give the impression that someone is observing these characters, and in this case it's us, the viewers. We are the voyeurs peeking into their lonely lives. Life almost never happens as a beautifully clean Richard Avedon photograph with a nice clean white background. There's always stuff going on. So the way we look at life is within a jumble of different obstructions and activities. They interfere with our vision and our understanding. So apart from the prying aspect of this layering technique, it's also closer to how we see the world through our eye. In terms of still photography, the Life magazine photojournalism aesthetic from the 50s and 60s aspired to the simplification of the information within the frame so that the photographers could accurately communicate the story. But over time, this has also changed and it's become stale and a bit bland. And photographers started to introduce elements to complicate the frame. And this compels viewers to engage more with the image and to decipher what's going on within it. Photographers are also trying to communicate more than just information. They're trying to convey a feeling or an emotion. Photographers like Paolo Pellegrin and Antonio Crottoville are masters of this kind of technique. The layering adds a visual depth to the frame and a complexity to communicate a whole wider view of the subject. Wong Kar-wai is repeating this technique throughout the film in order to include us as viewers within the story, but also to hold us at arm's length. The second lesson that gets really hammered home in this film is the effect that color has on mood. Color has for a long time been used in movies and in still photographs to evoke an emotional response from the audience. Throughout In the Mood for Love, the use of color green is often associated with the female actor, that's Mrs. Chan. Within this scene, Mrs. Chan's phone and the workplace have a murky, kind of unpleasant green hue. The color green represents the inner beliefs that she has and the societal pressures which are bearing down on Mrs. Chan. She can't escape the rules that trap her within an unfulfilling job and also bind her to her unfaithful husband, but also that stop her having an affair with the male character in the film. In contrast to that last scene, this view of a hotel room holds all the secrets of her and Mr. Chow's love, and it's drenched in red from the walls to the curtains to the bed to the floor. Red is closely associated with desire and passion, and in Chinese culture it's associated with happiness and love. Mr. Chow is tied more closely to the color red throughout the film. He's a man trapped in his own fantasy of desire. The contrast between these two colors throughout the movie represents how their deep love for each other is stalled by the reality that they won't pursue the relationship any further. So the film shifts between these two color palettes, having the effect of holding the audience in a kind of hazy, dreamlike state. Polish photographer Piotr Krobot was so inspired by this film that he tried to reproduce the look in this set of images. At the time that I first discovered this film, I was working on a project called The Edge of Town, and I wanted to adapt this way of seeing into my project. The thinking was useful in order to achieve the aesthetic that I was building, but I realized that it was impossible to get the sense of sensuality into my project because the subject matter was far too harsh and it didn't really fit. William Eggleston used color in a very particular manner, and he managed to convey a feeling of sensuality and sometimes decadence. His subject matter was the everyday, and he was able to communicate the tactile nature of life and how color can evoke a feeling of human presence. Sometimes dreamlike nostalgia shows through. A lot of his images have that ectochrome feel to them, and this film, In the Mood for Love, replicates that in a way. You can grade images in post-production to have a similar look to the In the Mood for Love film. This isn't really my thing, but if you're interested, have a look in the description and I'll leave a link, and you can play around in Photoshop. The next idea to glean from this film is the director's attention to texture. As the film progresses, you become very aware of the sensual nature of clothing, the knit, the color, and how the texture is contrasted against the soft, desirable skin. The clothing shifts around the body in a way that makes one more aware of the naked body within, more so than if it was just a naked body on the screen. But one also becomes aware of the texture of other elements within the frame. The wallpaper, the way that light falls across a wall. Sometimes one can almost smell what it's like within that scene. Wong Kar-wai and Doyle mainly used a 50mm lens in this film, which closely resembles what an eye sees. They wanted the audience to relate directly with the emotions that the characters were expressing. A longer lens limits our experience to the details that are being zoomed into, while a wide-angle lens puts the audience in the middle of the action. These decisions about focal length affect how viewers interact with photographs and with movies, and how they perceive and interact with the content. If you haven't seen this film yet, then you're in for an experience. It isn't just the aesthetic. He manages to convey the idea that life isn't just good or bad. It's more of an in-between kind of thing, with uncertainty and the confusion of life. I hope that there was something interesting in this video for you. Please like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.